Welcome back to PicklePatter, the podcast that dives deep into all things pickleball. I'm Mark, the guy who's all for leveling the playing field, unless it's my paddle on the chopping block.
And I'm Raven here to see if destructive testing is as dramatic as it sounds.
We'll get ready to unpack this. Because the United Pickleball Association of America, the UPAA, is shaking things up with their 2025 paddle certification rollout plan. It's a mouthful, I know, but this is going to change the game as we know it.
That's right. And the biggest headline, destructive testing. Now, before you imagine paddles being launched into a wall, let's clarify what this really means.
Yeah, it's not about smashing paddles to bits. It's more like giving them a super intense workout. Thousands of machine-driven shots to see how their performance changes over time.
What's fascinating here is that even paddles from the same model can perform quite differently. Some have these dramatic break-in periods where their power and spin change drastically.
So it's like you're playing with a totally different paddle after a few games.
Exactly. And that creates an uneven playing field, especially for the pros. Imagine facing an opponent whose paddle suddenly got supercharged. Talk about frustrating.
Not to mention the potential for injury. If you can't predict how a paddle is going to behave, it could lead to some awkward shots and maybe even some strains or sprains.
Right. So this destructive testing aims to bring some much-needed standardization to the game. They're trying to ensure that all paddles, regardless of brand or model, meet certain performance benchmarks.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. How do they actually test these paddles?
They focus on two key things: deflection and something called PDCOR, which stands for paddleball coefficient of restitution.
Okay, time out for a second. Deflection and PDCOR.
Yeah.
For those of us who aren't scientists, what do those even mean?
Think of deflection as how fast the ball bounces off the paddle face, basically how much spring the paddle has.
Okay, that makes sense. And PDCOR?
PDCOR basically measures how much pop your paddle adds to the ball. A higher PDCOR means the ball comes off your paddle faster. They measure the ball speed before and after it hits the paddle.
So they're basically creating a power profile for each paddle, like how much juice it packs.
You got it. They map out how a paddle's peak power changes over time. All of this happens in a controlled lab setting, thanks to some impressive machinery and some very patient scientists.
Now, who are the masterminds behind this whole operation?
The University of Massachusetts Lowell is developing the testing standards, and a company called Pickle Pro Labs is doing the actual testing. It's a pretty big undertaking.
It sounds like it. But all this testing can't be cheap, right? What's the damage for manufacturers who want their paddles to be certified?
Get ready for this, because it's a hefty price tag. An annual fee of $20,000, then another $5,000 per paddle model, and an additional $1,000 for each variation.
Wow. That's going to make some manufacturers sweat. But I guess it's all about making sure the pros are playing with consistent, high-quality paddles. It seems like the UPAA is serious about raising the bar.
Yeah, this is going to be a hot topic for sure. You've got players who are all for anything that makes the game fairer, but then you've got the smaller companies who are worried they'll get squeezed out. It'll be interesting to see how this all unfolds. I mean, it kind of reminds me of what happened in baseball a few years back with that whole juiced ball controversy. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Home runs were flying out of the park left and right. Nobody could figure out why for a while.
Turns out even subtle changes to how they made the baseballs were impacting how far the ball traveled. It sparked a huge debate about fairness and whether it was giving hitters an unfair advantage.
So are we saying pickleball is entering its own juice paddle era? Are we going to start seeing crazy power shots that defy physics?
It's certainly a possibility. But that's where this destructive testing comes in. It's about bringing those variables under control, making sure everyone's playing on a level playing field, and maybe even preventing some pickleball injuries along the way.
Makes sense. And speaking of controlling things, let's circle back to that provisional approval process. What does that entail for manufacturers?
It's kind of like a stepping stone. Manufacturers have until November 15th to apply for what the UPAA is calling provisional status. It applies to paddles that have already gotten the thumbs up from USA Pickleball.
So it's like a fast track for paddles that have already passed some basic checks.
Exactly. But even those paddles still have to meet some specific requirements. The spin limit can't be higher than 2,200 RPM, and the average deflection force needs to be at least 42 pounds.
2,200 RPM, that's some serious spin. No wonder they're trying to rein things in.
It is, and remember, those are just the interim standards. The full 2025 certification process with the destructive testing kicks in on January 1st. That's when things get really serious.
Mark your calendars, pickleball fans. January 1st, 2025. The day the pickleball world changes forever. Or at least the paddle part of it.
Maybe not forever, but it's definitely a big shift. It's like we're moving from the Wild West of paddle technology to a more regulated era.
And how do you think manufacturers are going to adapt to all of this?
Some might need to go back to the drawing board and rethink their designs, especially if they want to stay competitive at the pro level. I think we're going to see a lot more focus on quality and consistency rather than just trying to create the most powerful paddle on the market.
It's like the difference between a flash in the pan and a slow, steady burn. You want a paddle that you know is going to perform well game after game, not one that loses its oomph after a few matches.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And for players, knowing that both their paddle and their opponent's paddle meet these high standards brings a level of fairness and confidence to the game.
So less guesswork, more focus on skill and strategy. Sounds like a win-win to me.
It does, doesn't it? And who knows, maybe this whole thing will even spark some brand new innovations in paddle technology that we haven't even thought of yet.
Now that would be something. Imagine paddles that not only meet these new standards, but actually blow them out of the water.
Yeah.
Maybe lighter paddles, stronger materials, even crazier spin potential. The possibilities are endless.
You're getting a little carried away there. But I do agree, it's exciting to think about what the future holds. Pickleball is such a young sport. There's so much room for growth and innovation.
Speaking of innovation, we haven't even touched on the potential impact of all this. On the professional pickleball scene, a paddle challenge system, that's a total game changer.
You're absolutely right. That deserves a deep dive all on its own.
Well, lucky for you, that's exactly what we're going to do next. We'll be right back to discuss how this new system could shake up the pro ranks, create epic rivalries, and maybe even lead to some on-court controversy. Get ready for some piping hot takes.
All right, let's talk about this paddle challenge system and how it could shake things up in the pro pickleball world.
I'm all ears. This feels like it could add a whole new level of intrigue to matches.
Think of it like this. Every match becomes a high-stakes poker game. Players aren't just battling it out on the court. They're also trying to outsmart each other with paddle strategy.
Ooh, I like that analogy. So you're saying a player might try to psych out their opponent by making them think they have a super-powered paddle, even if it's totally legal.
Exactly. And remember, there are penalties for both failed and incorrect challenges. So a player can't just throw out challenges randomly. They have to be strategic and confident in their assessment of their opponent's paddle.
This is going to add a whole new dimension to the mental game of pickleball. It's like they're playing chess with paddles.
And let's not forget the potential for controversy. Picture this. It's a close match. Tensions are high. And a player makes a paddle challenge. The referee checks it out. And boom, the challenge is incorrect. The player who made the challenge loses the point. And maybe even the match.
The crowd would go wild. We could see rivalries ignite and tempers flare like never before.
It's definitely possible. It could even lead to accusations of gamesmanship, with players wondering if their opponents are intentionally pushing the boundaries with their paddle choices to gain an advantage.
Paddlegate. I can already see the headlines.
Let's hope it doesn't get to that point. But this new system could bring out a new competitive fear in some players. It'll be interesting to see how everyone adapts.
At the end of the day, the goal is to create a fairer, more transparent playing field, right?
Absolutely. And in the long run, that benefits everyone. Players, manufacturers, and the fans. We should see a bigger emphasis on skill and strategy, and less on equipment advantages.
So it's less about the paddle and more about the player. Pickleball purists are going to love that.
I think so. It brings the focus back to the heart of the sport. The athleticism, the finesse, the strategic brilliance. That's what makes pickleball so captivating to watch.
And hey, who knows? Maybe this will even inspire a whole new generation of pickleball innovators.
Imagine this. Manufacturers know their paddles will be put through these rigorous tests. That means they're incentivized to design even better, more consistent, and longer-lasting paddles.
Paddles that don't just meet the standards, but exceed them in ways we can't even imagine. Lighter, stronger maybe, with self-regulating temperature controls.
Okay, now you're definitely in science fiction territory. But who knows what the future holds? Pickleball is evolving at an incredible pace. And this new era of standardization could be the catalyst for some truly groundbreaking advancements.
That's what makes this so exciting.
Yeah.
The future of pickleball is bright, and it's only getting brighter.
Well said. Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of pickleball paddle testing and what it means for the sport. We've covered a lot of ground today.
And before we sign off, I want to leave you with this thought. We've talked about all the technical stuff, the new rules, the potential drama, but remember, at its core, pickleball is a game. It's about having fun, connecting with others, and getting some exercise.
Exactly. So no matter what paddle you're using, don't forget to enjoy the game. Get out there, play hard, have a blast. And we'll see you on the court.